Features Overview, or what we sometimes call the Ally Tools Overview session. My name is Al Goebel, and I'm a senior technical consultant here at Anthology, formerly Blackboard, working with you to deliver this session today. And as I was saying before, I did help with the configuration of Ally in your system. And just a little bit of background about me. I've been a technical consultant here going on 10 years, and I've been with Anthology, formerly Blackboard, going on 13. So it's great to be working with you all today. So the goal for our session today is to give you a full run through of all of the different Ally features, how they work, and where they're going to show up inside of your Canvas environment, how they're expected to behave, and what everything means when you see the dials or the buttons there. One thing I will mention during this session, we are going to cover some different topics. So I don't mind if you have a question about a specific feature or something that we're looking at, that you go ahead and bring it up. If you want to come on audio, put it in the chat, whichever works best for you. We've actually designed the session so that we can take questions throughout. There normally is some time at the end too, so if you don't get a chance to get your question in, we can circle back to it. So with this said, we're going to get started. And one of the first places we actually start when we talk about Ally is we start off what may seem like an odd place, but we talk about the workflow. And part of the reason is that is a very important part of the integration, but it was also something that the team was uh, very specific about how they wanted to integrate Ally into your environment. So one of the things that we were very careful with is that instructor workflows do not change in terms of the way that they add content or update content to their course. They don't have to do anything. Just because you turn Ally on doesn't mean they all of a sudden have to learn new ways to upload their files or anything like that. We were very purposeful in the way that we designed this so that they were able, when Allies turned on, and they were able to go ahead and add their content the way that they always have. So we didn't change that, but one of the things that we do now is, because of the way the integration works, is whenever they do upload that content into their Canvas courses, we are actually able, Ally gets notified of that upload, and then our process actually starts by piggybacking off of that existing workflow there. And so what happens is, once that content has been added to the course, we'll and Alpha is notified of that, then we will grab that content and run it through our automated accessibility checklist. And so what that checklist looks like is published upon our website. And if you're trying to write down the URLs, you don't have to worry. We will provide this slide deck as a PDF to you. So all of the URLs and everything listed in this slide deck you'll have later after the session. But so we have this automated accessibility checklist that we run the content through. And so there's a couple things that happens. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to check to see what type of content it is that was loaded into the course. And that's important because different types of content may have different types of accessibility issues. So we're going to check to see, is this a Word document, PowerPoint presentation, PDF document, HTML, or something else. So then, depending on what type of content it is, we'll run that through the automated accessibility checklist, and we will check for the common issues that exist for that content type. And so this checklist contains a wide variety of different checks. I think there's a little over 80 different accessibility checks that we'll run the content through. And those checks can be anything from very high level stuff. So for example, one of the things we'll look is if it's a PDF document, we'll look to see if it's a scanned document. And so then we'll do those type of high level checks. And then we'll go all the way down. We'll do very fine grained checks as well, such as we actually check the contrast levels at the individual character level. And this checklist wasn't something that we just came up with on our own. It is based on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 standard, or the WCAG 2.1 AA standard there, as is shown in the slide here. So what happens is, when we run that content item through the accessibility checklist, we're going to see if there's any issues, any accessibility issues there that we find in that content item. And based on what we find, we will assign that content item an accessibility score. And because it's percentage based, it's going to be somewhere between 0 and 100%. Now, one thing you will, when you see that score, know that it is a weighted average for that individual item. And part of the reason it's weighted is that some of our rules are more impactful to the accessibility of the document compared to others. So going back to the example earlier, if a document is scanned but not OCR'd, that impacts the accessibility of the whole document. A screen reader is not going to be able to read anything from that. So that is something that is very impactful to the accessibility of the document and is going to, if that is, if this document infringes upon that, then it's going to be weighed more heavily in the score than if there's one word that has a contrast issue. So know that when you see that accessibility score, it is weighted. The idea there is that it's supposed to reflect how accessible that item is and taking into account things like how many students it affects and how severely it affects them. And we get all that information from the checklist and looking at what we're able to get from the integration there. Now, again, this weighting and this was not done in a vacuum. This was based on research that was done by the W3C. So again, we're very careful about what we're putting out here to and again, the goal is not to try to ding or put a negative light on content, but we just want to draw attention to those items that need more assistance and becoming more accessible. Once we've gathered all that information, so we've run the content through the checklist, and so we know the accessibility issues that exist in that document, we then take that information and then we start to actually build out the tools that we present to the end users. And so the first tool that we have that we were able to use this information to help your users is with the alternative formats. And so I will say this is the what we refer to sometimes as the student facing side of Ally, but know that this is also available to instructors. The focus is the students here that'll be accessing the course, but this is a feature that is also available that instructors can actually use it to get alternative formats of their content as well. So what happens is that the idea behind the alternative formats is that we're trying to provide a more immediate, accessible starting point for your students without requiring any intervention at all by the instructors. So if you turn Ally on a course day one, the instructor has done zero remediation. Ally is already beginning to make an impact in your course because students can go in and request these alternative formats for the existing content. So if I do utilize some assistive technology, I can go in and generate an HTML version, which will work better with that assistive technology. Or if I'm using if I have a Braille device, then we can generate a Braille ready file for them that they can actually use with that device. So no, without anything being done by the instructor, Ally's already beginning to make an impact here by making these alternative formats available. And so one of the nice things is that it's not just about accessibility, but quality of life as well. We provide multiple ways in which the original course content can be consumed. And so there's even things in here you'll find that we have an EPUB format. So if you have students who use ebook readers or they have the ebook apps on their tablets or something, and they're really have gotten used to that technology and they like the reading experience they get from that, they can generate their course content in that format and import it into their ebook readers there. And again, you'll see this is kind of a continuing theme throughout what we're going to talk about today. One of the things that the way that we implemented this is that we did not want to interrupt anything that students are already used to doing. So when a student goes in and clicks on course content, that does not change. So if they're used to loading the original content, just going in and clicking on the link, that still works. What we do is we provide a contextual menu. So whenever they click on that down button and they can go and download the file, there's also an option there to be able to access the alternative formats. And we will demonstrate this shortly after we've gone through the alternative formats here. A couple of technical pieces here about the alternative formats as well. The way that they work, once we've scanned the document, we know how to generate the alternative formats for that document, but we do not actually create the file until the first time that it's requested. So it's that first time it's requested, we'll actually generate the file on the file system on the fly at that point. So if I go into the chapter one document and I'm the first one that's requesting the audio version of that, it'll take a minute or so for that to generate. And then once it's generated, it'll automatically download to my computer. What we do after that, though, is that audio file that I generated will be put into the cache. And so if someone else comes behind me and they request that audio file for that chapter one, it's going to automatically download for them. Now, that cache, just so you know as well, that cache lives on the ally side. So we're not writing files back into your course to create this cache, so it's not taking up any space in your Canvas environment. All of that is happening on our side, and so and that cache is managed. So if I request an alternative format and then nobody else wants it, and so it sits out there for extended period of time with nobody accessing it, then that will be removed from the cache, and that's not a big deal. It just means that if somebody does eventually come along and request that same file, instead of it being available in the cache, it'll just get generated again and then put back into the cache again until uh, it meets these parameters where it will be cleaned out. And so we do have information online about our alternative formats. I will go through these in just a moment, but we do have all of this documented online as well. So this is a screenshot. Like I said, I have a demo environment we're actually going to go take a look at in a moment. But you can see here, if you were to click on any of these links for the content, these would load the original files. To access the alternative format, you click on this down button, the download button here. And instead of doing preview or download, you go into alternative formats. So this is available when they're navigating the course. It's available from the files module. So if they click on the three button menu here, the alternative formats option is available there. Once you initiate the alternative formats tool by clicking on that button, you're going to get a menu that looks something like this, where you're going to be presented with the alternative formats that are available for this file type. And so you would select which one you want, and then you would click download. And then depending on whether that file's in the cache already or not, you may see this window. And so if it's not in the cache, it will take a moment to generate that, and so you will see this animation that lets you know that we're preparing the download. Once the download is finished, this window will go away and it will automatically download through the browser. So what I'm going to go do is go through all of the alternative formats that we have available, highlight some of the features that are there for those alternative formats, and then also talk about the original content types that these are available for, because not all of the alternative formats are available for every content type that we support. And so the first one we see here is actually a good example of that. The OCR PDF, you all probably know this already, but OCR stands for optical character recognition. And so oftentimes what happens is when you scan a document, it is actually put into a PDF as images. And so each page is just a single image. And if you've tried to highlight text or be able to select something in that, you can't because it's all one big image. And that poses a problem for screen readers because, again, they see an image. They don't actually see the text that's in that for the most part. So what this technology does is it analyzes the image and actually recognizes the text that is in that image and extracts it out. So then once that's done, you actually can go in, select the text, copy and paste it. You can search through it. And so that makes it a more accessible document. A couple things about the technology here. We are using Abby Fine Reader behind the scenes. That's one of the industry standards so that people use for OCR. And one thing I will mention too is that the quality that you're going to get of the OCR version is going to depend greatly on the quality of the original scan. If it's very dark and it's hard for a human eye with perfect vision to be able to recognize some of the text, then it's going to result in a very poor OCR version as well. It's going to miss some of the letters and things like that. So just keep that in mind that if it's a poor scan, then it may not come out as a really great OCR PDF here. Now, this alternative format is only available for scanned PDF documents. So if you're uploading a Word document, you're not going to see this alternative format available for that. The next alternative format we have is tagged PDFs. And so these are PDF documents that have semantic information about the structure of the document in that. And oftentimes you, you're able to generate these from Word or PowerPoint. But we are able to do that if the instructor just uploads a Word document. We're able to generate these automatically through the alternative format. One of the great things about this is that sometimes native Word or PowerPoint documents are hard to load on a mobile device. You may have to download another app or something like that. And so what this allows you to do is they can actually generate this and be able to view this natively on their mobile device as a PDF. And this alternative format is only available for the Word documents and PowerPoint presentations that are loaded into the course. The next one we have is HTML, which may seem like a bit antiquated, right? Who uses native HTML files anymore? But one of the things that's really nice is that this will actually take like PDFs or Word or PowerPoint documents and generate an HTML version that is not only just HTML, but it's responsive and mobile friendly. So it responds to the screen size and scales appropriately so that it's easy to read without having to do any horizontal scrolling there. Or even worse, if you have to do the pinch and zooming, and instead you can actually just hold the device with one hand and be able to scroll through it with the thumb or finger there. Another thing that's really great about the HTML versions is that they work great for offline use. So if you just want something to have available, maybe you're going to have to be riding in the car for a bit, so you can just throw this up on your mobile device, and you don't even have to be able to get internet access. You can just look through these HTML files and be able to read that. Another thing that is really awesome about this is that this version or this alternative format works great with existing assistive technology. And actually, of all the alternative formats, aside from the BRF file we'll talk about in a moment, this works the best with those with screen readers and those types of assistive technology. So that's something to keep in mind. And like I mentioned, this is available for PDFs, Word documents, and PowerPoint. Then we have, as I mentioned earlier, the EPUB format. So this is the format that ebook readers use. So this allows you to take the original course content and load it into your ebook reader where you can customize that reading experience. You can change the font and size easily and the color of the text and the backgrounds. Even more, if you use some of the annotation features or are used to that, this allows you to be able to do that with your course content and use those other built-in features that may be available to you within the ebook reader software or the device. And this format is available for all of the native documents that we support. So PDF documents, Word documents, PowerPoints, and HTML files. One of my favorite alternative formats is the audio alternative format. So this does text to speech conversion. And it's a little bit more sophisticated than just, doing that, because one of the things that's really nice is that we inject semantic information into the audio here. So what that means is if you're looking at a very technical document that may have a lot of headings and those type of things, the audio will clue you in. Okay, title, and then it will tell you the title of the document and then heading one. So it helps you be able to visualize that structure better. And so you have this audio format that you can use, while you're on your commute, maybe just you're multitasking a little bit, so your hands are occupied and your eyes are occupied, but you could set and listen to your course content while you're doing that. Another thing I think is really cool is that If you set the voice or the language in the original document, so if you go into Word, if it uses a different language, if you go in and change that, whenever the audio conversion process uh, l- receives that information and it recognizes that language, it will actually change the voice and pronunciation of the audio version based on what is set in that document. Another thing to keep in mind is that one thing here is that there is a limitation, and it is 100,000 characters, which ends up being about 2.5 hours of audio. So if you do have a document that is really long, then you may want to consider breaking that up into multiple documents if you think that is something that the students are going to want to generate an audio version of. So just keep that in mind. That's a technical limitation that we have, um, and so just something to be aware of. And now the audio format is available for all of the native formats that we support. So PDF documents, Word documents, PowerPoint, and HTML files again. Also mentioned earlier that they are able to generate an alternative format that is readable by electronic braille or refreshable braille displays. We use a BRF format or a Braille Ready file format for that, and we're actually contracting to use Grade 2 Unified English Braille, so for English documents. And we do have information with uh, the company that we're contracting with here about that file format if you want more information on that. And then this is available for all of the native formats that we support as well. The next format, and thanks, Brian, for addressing the question. I was getting ready. I just seen that, so thank you for taking care of that. The next format that we have is the Beeline Reader, and so this one is a little bit different. This uh, actually aims at improving that on-screen reading experience, and so what you'll find is that whenever you load this up, it uses this a gradient of color for the text to help guide your eye through that. So it kind of leads you into that. And so this was originally designed to help with speed reading, so that where the color changes, your eyes are naturally following that. But what was also found is that this is very helpful for those that may have dyslexia or ADHD or something like that. So it actually helps them focus and move through the text without losing their place or without things kind of getting rearranged there. Now, and I forgot to mention when we started, a lot of the alternative formats are automatically available, and you cannot turn them off. The ones that we're going to talk about from here moving forward, you do have some options there. So the Beeline Reader is one that you can turn off, but it is on by default. So this is one that you have to opt out of. And if you do want to turn it off, you go into the configuration UI, which is available to Canvas administrators, and you can go in there through the settings and turn it off. And this alternative format is available for PDF documents, Word documents, PowerPoints, and HTML files. The next one we're going to talk about is the translated alternative format. So what does is it uses machine translation to take the original document and convert it into one of 50 different languages. So I can upload a document, and then if it's in English, I could say convert this to Spanish, convert this to French, or something of that nature, uh, selecting one of the 50 options that are available, and it will convert that into um, another language. Yeah, and as it is mentioned, this is one that is actually off by default. And so you do have to opt in. So right now it is currently turned off in your installation. And part of the reason why this is off by default is that we do recognize that there are departments that teach modern languages. So the whole goal is actually teaching another language, and this can actually make things a bit easier or unnecessarily easier for students and may be able to circumvent some things that the instructors want them to do. So we don't want that. So this is turned off by default. And this is available for all of the native formats we support. And we do have more information about this online. I will mention, you may ask, well, what is the target for this? Why even have this? And part of the idea behind this was that you may have students who are taking a class in a second language. So they're, we're English based country here, but you may have students that do not speak English as their first language. So being able to go into a course, um, and be able to generate a document that's in a second language to you, being able to generate that into your native language and make it easier to consume. So that was the thought process behind that. But again, like I said, we recognize that there are also ways that this would help circumnavigate that. Um, I don't know if yeah. I was going to say I don't think it's Google, but I wasn't sure. So thanks, Brian. Yeah, to Amazon-based service there. That was on the product roadmap. I will have to check and see if that is still there. I have not received any updates on that, so I don't know where we are with that, but that is something I can follow up on. You're welcome. So the last alternative formats that I want to mention is oh, sorry, I got a question here about why would somebody want to turn off Beeline Reader? Um, I think that, as we're adding these, part of it may be not so much that you want to turn it off forever, but as we were adding these, we're putting in these options to turn them off. I think part of it is just the customizability of the rollout. One of the things you'll see with the way we set up the configuration is that we want to be really flexible in how people roll out Ally when they're initially implementing it. So the ability to turn Ally on or off at the course level is something, as a tool, being able to say, okay, we want to target these 10 courses with Ally, and see how that goes. And so we really want to be um, flexible in that regard. So I'll double check and see what the thought process is, but I believe part of it is we don't want to just introduce a new alternative format and then you not have a way to be able to review it and determine if this is something you want for your institution or not. So I think the Beeline Reader was one of the first ones we introduced like that, where you can turn it off. If it's not, maybe you want to review it, develop documentation for your support people and that kind of stuff. So this gives you that flexibility to be able to, um, turn it off in your production environment and maybe go and gather information about that before you turn it on. You're welcome. So the last alternative format that we have is the Microsoft Immersive Reader, and this one is really impressive as well, and it has a lot of features built into it. So some things it has kind of like the ebook or the ebook reader features, where you can go in and change the font size, text spacing, and the contrast between the text and the background. So you kind of get that ebook feel right in the browser. It actually does offer some help with spelling and grammar, so you can break the words up into syllables. You can have it tell you the articles of or the tops of what a word is. So you can go in and say, this is a verb, these are nouns, and have those labeled and highlighted for you. It includes a picture dictionary there. It actually offers a focus ability to where you can turn that on and you can have it just have one line highlighted or a couple lines or a whole paragraph or something like that. So if you wanted to kind of guide you through the text that way, it also does text to speech. So it will read that to you right from the browser. And this piggybacks off of the previous translate or the previous alternative format. If you have translation turned on, then it will also do translation right in the interface for you. But if we have the translated alternative format turned off, then that option is not available in the immersive reader as well. And so then this is available for all of the formats that we support. Um, so the PDF documents, Word documents, PowerPoints, and HTML files. So in terms of STEM material, I'm assuming you're talking about things like equations and, when they use like MathML and those type of things. Um, yeah. So when I spoke to some of the members of the ally team about this last, and I can go and get an update of that. Part of the problem is that there's a lot of, I won't say a lot, but there's various different ways that those could be implemented. There's different types of, uh, I don't want to say languages. I'm a software engineering background, so that's kind of what my focus is. But there's different technologies that are currently being used to be able to build equations and things into documents. And so there's kind of not, the way I understood it is that there wasn't an industry standard that had emerged yet. And so uh, they did tell me they were continuing to monitor that and look to see, continuing to evaluate that to see how they could build in more support for that right now. It's not something that we're specifically addressing at the moment, but it is something that is definitely on the roadmap that we continue to monitor for the roadmap. That was trying to think when I last spoke to them about that. It may have actually we're in 23 now, so it may have been about a year and a half. So I'll follow up with the team and see if I could get an updated answer on that. Um, but yeah, it is something that they are aware of. They were watching. It was just at the time, it was kind of difficult to implement something because if you support this one type, then it leaves out these others. So they're just trying to find the best way to incorporate that. But let me make a note of that to follow up on that. Okay. So I'll work to get you a better answer there. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And that was one of the things that it was very tricky wasn't the word, but yeah, that's what they were saying. That it was kind of a tough thing when they were looking at it. So with that said, I'm actually going to switch over before we go into the next tool. I am going to go into a demo environment here that we have in our demo course. And we're going to take a look at some of these alternative formats and how they work. And one thing is I'm in as an instructor, and so I just wanted to show you that the alternative formats are available here. So you can access these as an instructor in the course. Another thing to keep in mind as an instructor, you do have the ability to turn off alternative formats for individual files. And you could do that when you come in as an instructor. You'll notice that there is a down arrow at the top here. And so you can disable alternative formats just for this file. And so that basically makes that tool unavailable um, for anyone that's trying to download an alternative format for that specific file. It's not a one-time thing. You can turn it off temporarily and then come back in and re-enable it. So if you turn it off, then you can just come back in and say enable for this file. But that is an option that's only available to instructors. So I want to point that out, but I'm going to actually switch to the student view. Well, no, one of the things we see here is that those dials that were there before are actually gone. So that's one thing we know. We're in student view because we don't see those indicators. So to access the alternative formats, first thing I'm going to do is actually show you that as a student, if I come in and I'm just used to clicking on the link, it's going to load the content natively like it always does um, with what we see here in your Canvas environment. Um, so this loads the content natively. This is a Word document. This is our demo Word document. You're going to see a lot about Van Gogh today. Um, and so this is what this content looks like natively. So from here, I can also access the alternative formats menu. I'm actually going to open that in a new tab so we can compare. But I can also access it from this down menu here and go into the alternative format. Now, since this is a Word document, I do not have the OCR PDF option, but I do see everything else. I can generate a tag, PDF, HTML, a lot of these others. So let's go ahead and grab a tag PDF. Now, notice that this automatically downloaded, and that's because this was already generated. It existed in the cache, so it didn't have to go and regenerate that file again. So if I open this up, I can see um, it doesn't look exactly like the document that I have. Some of the formatting is different, but we do see here all my tables and images come across. So we can see there's my tables, there's the image. So all of that's intact, but now we have a tag PDF that we can navigate through as well because they build in the headers and those type of things. Another alternative format, like I mentioned before, is we do offer an HTML version. And so what this is, let me grab, I want to make sure, I think it will normally, if I just double click on it, load it in Edge, I don't know. But this is the PDF. Notice again, some of the formatting is different, but all of the content is still here. So you know, uh, we have the table. The table structure is still there. The images are still there. But one of the things I'll show you here is that if we were to make this smaller, then we can see that the HTML responds even with the images, making it so that I don't have to scroll horizontally here to be able to view that. All of it is responsive and adjust to the screen size. So if you're on a mobile device, this works really well with that. I don't have the ability to display an EPUB or an electronic Braille file here. Um, I will go ahead and do the audio. You won't be able to hear it, but so it looks like this one was not cached. So this is what it looks like whenever it takes a moment to actually generate a file. And normally the audio, I think, is one of the ones that takes the longest. Um, but it normally just takes about a minute or so. And there it is. So again, I don't think you're going to be able to hear this because Teams doesn't, I don't think it shares my system audio. But if you were able to hear this, it would be uh, playing, you would hear that semantic information that comes across where it talks about the title and the headers and everything that's built out in the document. So let's actually get to, so the Beeline reader, we'll get to some that are a bit more exciting here. So we'll download that one. And this one actually downloads as an HTML file as well. And so we'll try and see if it'll, okay, it does load directly in Chrome. So with this one, notice that it looks similar to our HTML file, except for we have these options at the top. And so these adjust the gradient of the color of the text here throughout the document. So right now it's on bright, and I like that one. If you're going to go with a lighter background, to me it pops more. Um, the dark, I kind of lose that in some. Maybe my eyes just aren't able to pick up some of the differences, but I feel like the transition is way too subtle there. But that's my personal opinion. But you can see here how it goes from like the blue into the dark text, and then out of the dark text into the red. and then it'll go back from the red into the dark and then back into the blue, and it will repeat that throughout the document so that as you're reading, this text is changing colors and you're able to follow it better. There's also, if you don't want the red, you can go with the blues, which kind of goes in from blue into like the purple. This one is if you're, I guess, just wanting something more monochromatic. You can have the grays. That one is even harder for me to pick up. And then we also have one if you prefer a dark background. Then what happens is that the background is black, but then it goes from like the blue into a light text, and then into purple, and then back into the light text and into the blue. So that's the Beeline reader, and you'll notice that it mentions down here that it's powered by that. The translated version, I just wanted to show you. I know you have it disabled right now in your environment, but these are some of the languages that we support. Notice that in this interface, the languages are written in their native language. So, and they're sorted alphabetically by that. So, and then we have like the English translation to the right. So if you're looking for Spanish, it's not going to be down here. It's going to be under Espanol, or you also have Mexican Spanish. And then, so uh, Irish, for example, is a bit different. So let's do Spanish, and we'll download that. And this will download, I think, also as an HTML file. Yes. And so again, it looks like our native HTML file over here, but instead it was, it's in Spanish. And you notice it went away, but there was the pop-up here from Google Translate that I noticed this is Spanish and wanted to translate it into English for me if I wanted to. So this is what the translated document looks like. And then we have, I'm going to go back up to the last one I want to talk about is the immersive reader. And so there's a lot going on with this one. And so when we take a look at it, you'll notice that it's actually starts off spaced out quite a bit. So we actually have some options on the right-hand side here. So we can go into our text preferences and we can adjust the text size. We can turn off increased spacing if we want. We can go way up. I don't like it that big. You can change the style of the font that you want. So if you want something with a serif, or if you want Comic Sans, you can adjust that. They do have some themes, so if you prefer maybe dark background, light text, you can do that. Or if you want something that's a little bit softer, you can select those. And then they have many options down here that you can pick from that if you want to use. And so if you want some of the additional formatting options, you can turn that on as off as well. So you notice that like the bold goes away here. So then we have our grammar options. So we can turn on syllables, if I could talk today, so that it actually breaks down our words into different syllables. And then, if we want to, we kind of get that's part of the picture dictionary there. And then we can also have it pronounced for us. We also have the ability to turn on different parts of speech. So we can turn on so that the nouns are highlighted. We can have verbs highlighted too under different colors. And you can change the color. So if you want something different, you can do that as well. There's also the ability to turn on labels. So when we turn that on, you'll see that now we can, okay, this, not only do we have the coloring, but then, here's adjectives, noun, verbs, adverbs, and those different labels for the parts of speech. And the last piece on this side is the focus option that we have here. So we can have it focus on one line at a time. We can do multiple lines, so we can navigate through this and scroll down. And so we'll do like 3 lines. We can even do, I believe this breaks it down into 5 lines. So again, it helps you just break it up and be able to navigate through that different places. It also, because we do have the translated alternative format enabled, we have the ability to, on the fly here, translate this into another language. This is sorted by the English version of the language name. So in this case, Spanish is down in the S's, and so we can see. Um, we can turn that on by word or by document. So if we turn it on just by word, what happens is when you click on that, you get the Spanish translation here, and you can even listen to that. But if you want the whole document, then you have to turn that option on. Last thing I'll mention is that there are audio features. So if you want to change the voice settings, you click on this option, and so you can make it go, normal speed. You can speed it up, and then you can choose what type of voice that you want, and then you can click play, and it'll actually go through and read uh, the text for you. You can combine this with the line focus as well. So it'll focus on the line that it's reading and then also highlight each word as it covers it. So that is, so that's the immersive reader. The last one I want to see here, I'm looking for, okay, so this is a scanned PDF. So if I was to load it, so this is our same document, but it's been scanned. So you can see there's some kind of fuzziness going on with some of the lettering here. But because this is a scanned document, we can have an OCR version of that generated. And so we can actually take a look and notice that it does try to keep a lot of the same formatting. And some of the things that it's able to pick up, it tries to make it a bit more clear here. Um, and so it does not do, again, a perfect job. Some of the things come through there, but for the most part, it picks up, here we've got the images. Um, Within there as well. So again, this is going to be uh, dependent upon the original version of this. So, and those are all of the alternative formats that we have that I'm able to show you today. Are there any questions? Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is transition into the instructor focus tool, which is the instructor feedback. And so this tool is only available, unlike the alternative formats, which is available to both students and instructors. This tool is only available to instructors. And so the aim of this tool is to give them, for lack of a better term, feedback about the accessibility of their course content. So if something does have, um, if this does have, issues with whether it's a scanned PDF or some of these other accessibility issues, we will use that checklist to be able to identify those. And then we use the score here to help guide you to those ones that need the most assistance. And so in this case, in the example here, we see that this document scored 22%, which is pretty low. But so that's going to, show up as a red indicator, which we'll talk about in a moment. But there's kind of, when I talk about the instructor feedback tool, there's really two goals that we have for this tool. And I like to refer to them as maybe short-term and long-term goals, right? So the short-term goal is this. We want you to be able to use this tool to go into your course. And if there's a document that has accessibility issues, we want you to be able to use this tool to guide you through that process of fixing those issues and making that document more accessible, right? And we do that by drawing your attention to those documents that need improvement. We do that by providing important information on why this accessibility issue is an issue, and then most importantly, provide information on how to address it within your document. So that's kind of the short-term goal. The long-term goal that we have is that we want to generate a change in behavior over time. As instructors engage with this tool more, as they learn, when I'm creating new content and I throw an image into my Word document and I say, wait a minute, I need to go in and add a description for this because I know Ally is going to tell me that I need to do that. So, and I already know how to do this because I've fixed countless documents. So I'm going to go ahead and do that before I even upload it into Ally. That's the long-term goal. We want them to be aware of these accessibility issues when they're creating new content. We want them to be thinking about those and and incorporating that into their content creation process so that by then as they're uploading that new content, they're already starting out with a much higher accessibility score as their baseline because they're learning from this and changing that behavior over time. So again, we use a traffic light approach, if you will, to the indicators that we use within the courses. And so starting off in the red, we have items that score between 0 and 33%. Oftentimes, these items will either have a large number of accessibility issues or they will have some pretty severe accessibility issues. And so one of those two will greatly impact the score of that document. So this red tells us, hey, you need to stop and take a look at this. This document really needs some work. Then going up from there between 34 and 66%, we have this orange indicator. And these documents are doing better. Maybe they don't have the severe issues, but may still have a larger number of other issues in the document. So it still needs improvement, but we're not in that severe area any longer. And then we have two greens. So if something is between 67 and 99%, it's going to get a light green indicator. These files are doing good, but they're not perfect, right? They still have some little things out here that need to be fixed that would make this document more accessible. The dark green is for an item that we call perfect. Now, we know in this world there's nothing that's technically perfect, right? But what this means is that we've run that through the checklist. All of the things that we're able to check for, this document has addressed those. So there's not any of those things out there. Are there still opportunities for improvement? Probably. And so we want to encourage everybody to continue, to try to improve upon things. But in terms of the things that we're able to check for, what we're looking for, or what we're able to find, we did not find any in this document. And so that's why we give it a 100% score. So that's a good question, Adriana. Why, if we're able to generate these alternative formats, why do instructors need to do that work manually? Um, So one thing that I want to be very careful about, the alternative formats are, I want to think of this as steps. If the goal is to be completely accessible, the alternative formats are a step in that direction, but they don't solve the issue. For example, if images are in a document and they do not have captions or descriptions, the alternative formats is not able to generate that. So we're trying to help make some steps to make those more accessible, but there are things that we just cannot fix without human intervention, right? So I was speaking with another client about this yesterday. AI may get to the point to where it's able to analyze the whole text of a document and then look at that image, analyze its content, and then be able to intelligently not only come up with a description of that. I think we could probably have AI that can describe an image, but oftentimes the important part is why is that image used, right? So there's some contextual information that the creator of that content knows. I'm going to use this image because it illustrates, fine brushwork here. Or I want to use this image because it's a great period piece and about the time that we're describing here. And then explain why, it's a great example of that. Uh, so we're not there yet in terms of that level of sophistication. So there are still things that need to be improved upon. So we're not going in, and the alternative formats don't fix a lot of these accessibility issues. We're just providing in other formats that can help get around some of that, or help provide a better starting point than where we were before we turned Ally on in the course. So this is kind of so that's a good first step, the alternative formats. Now the next step is we've made things better, but we need to keep moving, right? So and so that's where the instructor feedback tool comes in. That is a great way to put that, that the alternative versions can only be as good as the quality of the content that we provide. Exactly. So, um, yeah, and Lori's right. So these indicators can help lead you through the content and say, okay, this is where I need to put my focus on. And we actually have, when I get into the demonstration part, there's an accessibility report that instructors have access to for their course. And when I go through that, I like to use that as a way to develop a strategy for if I'm wanting to, I'm an instructor and I want to fix my whole course, that report is going to help give me some strategies on, or really pathways on how to do that. And so I'll demonstrate that more in just a little bit as well. But those are great questions and great comments as well. So the instructor feedback tool is launched with a button, and that indicator is the button that you use. And you're going to see this in several places in the interface. So if you're in the Files section, there is actually an accessibility column where that indicator will show up. If you're in the modules view, then you'll see the indicator to the right of each of the files that it has scanned. So it will show up there. And then in the course view, it shows up to the immediate left of the link of the original content. So again, you click on the link, it's going to launch the original content. You click on that indicator, and it's going to launch the instructor feedback. And then you'll actually be able to go in. Notice too that so this is content that's created through the Canvas interface, and there is an indicator up here too. So if I'm editing this here, I can actually launch the indicator from that, or launch the instructor feedback from that indicator that's in the upper right-hand corner here. So a couple things about the instructor feedback tool before we go into the demonstration. We recognize that instructors have limited time. I used to work in higher education. I remember a panic instructor coming the day before classes and dropping like loads of this physical content that needed to be digitized on my desk, and was like, "I need help. This has to be done by tomorrow." Right? So, um, I know we know what that is like, and so one of the things that we do with the instructor feedback tool, if you have multiple issues within your document, we don't bombard you and say, hey, you've got, 17 issues in this document that need to be addressed, right? What we actually do is we will pick one of the issues. And the way that we pick that is we look for, out of that list that we have identified in the document, we'll look for the things that's easier to resolve, doesn't require a lot of time or maybe additional assistance. And so we'll bring that one to the forefront first. And so when they load into the instructor feedback tool, they're going to see one issue in their document, and it's going to be that one that doesn't require a lot of time. Um, and if they do need assistance, it's going to be easier for them to kind of get assistance for that. And so they'll be able to go in and do that. And then when they upload their modified document that they've addressed that issue, we automatically rescan it, and then if there are other issues, we'll kind of go through that loop again. So it's kind of this iterative process. Now there is a way to for your power users, as we'll see shortly, that as they get familiar with Ally, and they're like, okay, I know this document has multiple issues. What are they? And so they can actually go into a list of the issues and be able to see that. But we just did not want to put that out front and let that be the initial experience that an instructor has with the feedback tool. And so the improvement workflows are going to be one of three different workflows that they're going to experience. So when they do click on that button and they get that, we've highlighted that single issue, there's going to be one of three ways they're going to be able to resolve that. One way is they're going to enter additional metadata. This flow normally happens for like embedded images in the course. So you've uploaded an image in the course and there's not a description or something. Um, so what this is going to do is when you click on the instructor feedback, it's going to give you information on how to write a good description, and then it's going to give you a text box to be able to put that in. That one instructors are probably not going to interact with as much. The second workflow, and this is probably the one they're going to work with the most, is uploading an improved version of that document. So they have the document in their course. Ally is going to walk them through the steps on how to address this issue in that document locally. So they're going to have it on their computer opened up, fixing it, saving it, and then they're going to upload that improved version. Ally will rescan that, make sure that that issue is addressed. And then if there's others, it'll bring that to the forefront. The other workflow is that we do provide uh, this option for content that is created through the built-in editor in Canvas. You'll see it often through some of our interfaces referred to as WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get editor. Um, so if you have created that type of content in your course and there may be some contrast issues or something like that, you can actually launch the instructor feedback tool for those, and there's a guide there on how to fix that. So just to quickly give you an overview of what this instructor feedback interface looks like, with all the arrows, it can kind of look a bit overwhelming. But I like to first of all split this interface in two. And so if you kind of look, there's 2/3 of the left side of the screen is the preview area, and then the right third is like the actual ally information. So in the preview area on the left side, we have a couple of different ways to navigate this document. In the upper left, there is a page navigator. So we can go from page 1 to page 2, page 3, and so on. But also you'll notice that there is this highlight here. And so this one says 1 of 15. And so there's the ability to actually click through the highlights of this issue. So what happens is this is the issue. The issue is that we've identified text that has insufficient contrast, and there's 15 occurrences of that one issue in the document. So you can actually use the arrows here to navigate between each of those occurrences. And so you can go through and see that. If you want to turn off the highlights, you can click on this button and it will actually disable that, which will also disable the navigation as well for that. But there's certain things that it's kind of hard. We tell you, hey, there's text that has contrast issues, and we don't highlight it out. Then you're stuck sorting through the document and saying, okay, well, what is it? Which one of these is it? And sometimes it may be obvious, sometimes it's not. Um, and so that is what the highlighting feature does. Uh, and then there is a zoom feature. So the plus and minus here will actually allow you to zoom in and out of the document. And then you have a scroll bar. You can actually just scroll through this document like it's a web page as well. So there's several ways to navigate that. But then on the right-hand side, we have all of this information. And this is where a lot of the interaction is going to happen. So we have the score for the document that we're looking at. In this case, this one is at 41%. And then below that, we have information about the issue that we're focused on. So the issue that Ally surfaced here is that this document contains text with insufficient contrast. And then there are two buttons below that. There's one button that says what this means. And I call this the why button, right? If you want somebody to care about something that they're doing, I believe you need to tell them the impact that that process is going to have on other people. So what this means, when you click on that, it's going to tell you technically what this means, right? There is text that is so light that for people with visual impairment, it may be difficult for them to read that, right? Or it's lighter than that. But then it'll also go into the why. It'll talk about how some people with visual impairments may not actually be able to see that very well and make it hard for them to read. And so it really gives this explanation of technically what is the issue, but also what is the impact on others that this issue presents. And so then once you have that, then you have the how to fix contrast. button. So this is the let's fix it then, right? So that walks you through the steps of actually going in and addressing the issue within your original document. That section below is where you can either drag the file or click the browse button and upload that file into Ally here so they can rescan it and then evaluate that document for you. Now, I mentioned earlier that for your power users, as they get more accustomed to this, that they may want to see all of the issues, and that's where this button comes into play here. So this button will actually show you all the issues that we've identified within this document. So this is a workflow for the metadata that I was mentioned earlier. So this is an image that is missing a description. So again, we have, what this means, how to write a good description, which just basically walks you through the steps of the, best practices on how to do that. And then it just gives you a text box here to be able to drop that in and save it. Or you can, if this image is just decorative, serves no contextual purpose, then you can indicate that by clicking that button there. And this is one of those that is one of the workflows through the content editor that's built into Canvas. So in this case, we have text with contrast issues. And so what it actually does is highlights these, and then it gives you some alternative colors for the text that you could use. Um, that would provide proper contrast. And so, obviously it gives us black, but then it also gives us some of the greens that are close to this color, but would provide enough contrast. And you can actually select, if you want to change them individually, you can do that. Or you can select to apply to all the occurrences, pick one, and then click apply, and it will address that issue for you. So I'm just going to jump from the slides here and actually go into um, so Lori, I believe right now we are able, if you put I'm trying to remember if it's embedded or if it's a link. Brian may remember. It's been a while since I looked at this. YouTube content, I think the way their APIs work, if you link to YouTube content, we are able to tell if that has captions or not. I think it's actually if it's embedded in an HTML file. I apologize. If it's embedded in an HTML file, then we're able to scan that HTML file and see if there's captions that are a part of that video from YouTube. But we are doing work to improve our video and audio support. I don't have any specifics around that, but again, I can check and see if there's anything updated in the roadmap for that. So I'll make a note of that as well. So I'm going to go back to our original document here. Actually, this one's not doing too bad. It's at 60%. But this tells me that I have documents that contains tables that are missing headers. So I can navigate. Oh, it looks like it's just one. So there's only one occurrence here. You can see that it's highlighted. Now it automatically goes to that. If I turn this off, then I can't use the navigation, but I can, navigate between the pages here. So if I want to see why this is even important, I click on this button and it tells us here, about proper table headers, help readers understand how they're organized. And then there's also normally the next tab is why. So, what is the issue? Why is it important? Um, and so, for students with visual impairments, this helps them be able to interpret the table better. And again, I think this is important information to have whenever you're going through and trying to fix these things, because knowing why this is an issue can also help provide some idea when you're fixing it of what you need to do there. The next button here is how to set table headers. And so it's going to ask us which version of software that we're using locally gives me the option to download this if I want. So I could download the original file. And then, so I pick which one I'm using. So I'm using Microsoft Office here. And then it gives me the steps for how to go in and fix this. And even sometimes they'll offer these contextual tips on, here's some tips for creating tables, or if it's an image, here's some steps for writing a good description and those type of things. And you can actually print out these instructions. If it's something you're going to be doing a lot of, you can just print that out and go through a bunch of your documents and fix that if you choose. And then once you've got that fixed, you upload the document that you've addressed that in, and it should address that. Now, I don't, um, I didn't fix this, but I do have a document with this already fixed. So if I click on this, it's going to upload the file, and part of this process is it's actually evaluating it as well. So now it comes back and tells me that I did address that issue, and it's presenting a couple more of options here um, of things that I can go in and address as well. So one thing I'm going to do is I want to demonstrate. I'm going to go back to a document that has a lot more issues though. And it's going to tell me I need to talk to my administrator because I uploaded I might need to get some help because I uploaded a document that's actually worse than what it was originally, right? So I did not mean to do that. So if I want to see, I have this document and I want to fix it. I do have the option here. It's telling me that, the first thing it wants me to do is fix images with descriptions. But if I actually am more of an experienced user already, I can get a listing of all these issues and go through all these before I actually upload a document if I wanted to. So I could see here that, this is the one, this is where we're at. Then we have the document does not have headings. Then, it doesn't have a correct language set, doesn't have, it has tables that are missing headers, and then there are items with insufficient contrast. So I can actually go through and address, uh, you know, go through the how to, then come back and go into the next one, and so on, if I wanted to be able to address these all at once. Again, we just like to bring kind of the easiest one to the surface so that they can, even if you've got limited time, you have the ability to make some improvements here and be able to fix that. Up here, we have an image that does not have a description. So again, this is another example of the metadata uh, interface. I'm not going to correct this because this is a demo course, but I would be able to go in and type in a description here and click add, and that would then associate a description with this image within the course. Now, I mentioned earlier that we have an accessibility report. And I imagine there may be several different ways that an instructor may approach to fixing their course. Option one is I'm just going to go into this view and just go until I find, this issue, and then I'll keep going and go that way. And that way you know, may work for them. To me, that could end up being may make it easier to miss stuff. Um, I had one person ask me, well, what about if I've got it broken down in modules and I want to take one module at a time? I think if you're going to do that, the best way to do that is to go into modules view, and then you can see the indicators there. So if I want to just focus on module one, I could go and do that here. But let's say that I've actually got some time on my hands and I really want to focus on the accessibility of my course. The accessibility report is a good place to start there. Because one of the things it's doing, not only is it going to tell you about the accessibility issues in your course, but there's actually a couple different paths that we're going to give you here to help you, depending on what your mindset is and how you want to work. We're going to give you several different ways to be able to approach fixing the content within your course. So the first thing we do is we give you a breakdown of all the content in your course. So if you're ever curious about, how, what is the most prevalent content in my course, In our demo course, it is neck and neck between Word documents and PDFs, with Word documents barely coming out on top, right? But over half of our content in this course is either a Word document or a PDF document, right? So that tells me a lot about the type of content that I'm using. It may also speak to some of the accessibility issues I may run into and the type of software that I'm going to be working with, right? Um, so it's good to know that information. It's good to see what that breakdown looks like. And you'll notice some of these aren't files. So you see pages. A page is a content item that is created through the interface inside of Canvas. And a lot of these are the assignment is something that was created through the assignment tool. Same thing for the quiz and announcements, discussion topics, and the syllabus. HTML files, presentations, images, PDFs, Word documents, those are items that were created externally and then uploaded into your course. So one thing I could do is, again, depending on my workflow and what I'm trying to do is, if I just got a few minutes and I want to jump in and try to make an impact, as much of an impact as I can start with the easiest issues to fix. And so what this is going to do is that when I click on this, it's going to present me a list of all the content items that have accessibility issues that are the easiest to fix within your course. And so it's going to present these. So if I click on this presentation here, and I launch the instructor feedback tool from this interface, I'm going to see here that I have text with insufficient contrast. And then again, it's going to give me, this is actually going to show all the occurrences of that. And I have all the information here that I need to fix that. And so I can fix that one. Then if I still got time, I can come back and jump to the next one. And again, this is just really short burst of easy items to fix. Trying to get, maybe I'm starting out new, or again, maybe I just don't have a lot of time. So this is a way that I can approach. It gives me a strategy for approaching that content and being able to address it. Maybe I have a bit more time though, and my focus isn't on just quickly getting something done. Maybe I have a lot of time and I say, listen, I really want to take a dent out of the accessibility issues in my course. And so you want to do that by starting with the items that have the lowest score. And so what I could do is I can go into this flow, right? So I click start here, and now I'm going to be presented with a list of items in the course that have the lowest score. And so it's sorted from lowest to highest, right? So if I go to the end, I'm going to see these items that are in the red but have the highest score there. And I can sort, maybe I want to tackle the one that has the most issues. So I can sort this list based on these columns. Maybe if I wanted to go alphabetically. But I think if you're approaching with the lowest scoring items, you probably just want to go by default with the lowest score here. And so again, it's the same idea. We click on the instructor feedback. We'll start at the top of the list here, and we'll go through and work to try to address this. So this is a scanned PDF. So one thing I would want to do is maybe try to get an OCR version of that, either by rescanning the original with using OCR software or taking this scan. And as an instructor, I can actually go in, to my course, find that file and generate an OCR version as the alternative format. And I've seen some then come back and take that and upload it into this right here. Um, so those are some options there. But maybe another thing that I want to do is if you're wanting to be productive and you like the idea, I think they called it batching when this was talked about this in some productivity circles, where instead of working on a single document and fixing all those issues or starting at the low end, I want to focus on one particular type of issue and address that in all the documents that I have. So let's say that I've now know what contrast issues look like, or we'll say since it's on the first page here, say I've learned how to add descriptions to documents, and so I want to take care of all of the documents that have that. So I can start with the HTML documents here. And so now I have all of these documents here have something in common, and that is they all contain images without a description. So I could start at the top and just work my way down and just going through and add in descriptions, for all these images. So I start with the first one, go in and find out um, what images don't have a description here. And okay, yeah. So this isn't a case where the description was just a file name. So we do check for, we're not able to check for very sophisticated descriptions, but we do check if, okay, if they just put the file name in there, that's not good. Um, so in this case, we could fix that and then be able to move on. If I wanted to pick a different issue, maybe I wanted something more impactful, I could sort by the severity here. And so again, the most impactful issue we have is that documents are scanned but not OCR'd. Um, I do see there's quite a bit here that have tables that don't have headers. So I could go into that one and start working through that list. So I think again, this is all this is here for is it gives you information about your course, but it also gives you paths for improving your course as a whole. I don't think navigating through the course, while some people may choose to do that because they're more familiar with that content, and maybe that's the way they want to go, and that's awesome. They can do it that way. But if they're looking for some other strategies or other workflows, I think the accessibility report is a really good place to start to say, because it can be overwhelming. This course has 613 items in it. It could be a bit overwhelming if I find out that there's a lot here that needs improvement upon. Where do I start? Well, here's some paths you can start. You can start with the local scoring stuff. You can go with the easiest to fix stuff, or you can take a particular issue and you can just focus on that and address that issue in all the documents that have that issue. And if you just want to look, there is an option here to go into the content view, and this is all of the files in your course sorted by initially by score, but you can sort it by the number of issues. Um, or you can again do alphabetically. So if you just want to go through all of the files, this is a good place to go as well. But that brings us to we've got about 5 minutes left. I do have a couple of slides here, just some informational things. I want to cut through. I've already talked about the report. Um, so again, just to summarize, I believe there's a session later today for those that may be attending that on the institutional reports. I don't really want to talk much about that, but again, when we talk about Ally, it all starts off with this content being added to your system. And then we scan that and we're able to take that and we're able to create a starting point for you by these alternative formats. Finding some ways to help improve the way the students interact with this content, making it more accessible for them. And then we had the instructor feedback tool, which is that next step of, okay, now let's take and let's really improve upon the original content. Let's try to make that original content more accessible for our students. And then, like I said, the institution report session that we have will be focused on being able to get information from that to see how you're doing as an institution, to help guide you as you roll out training and do those things, to help you understand what's happening from an accessibility standpoint in your environment, to be able to help guide that. And then I believe that this was posted in the chat, but I do want to encourage you, if you have not registered for our user group website, go and do that. It's at usergroup.ally.ac. It's a great place to interact with the product team, to be able to interact with your peers at other institutions. Oftentimes, there are articles and things that are published in here that'll help. And most importantly, if you have feedback, you have an idea that would help improve upon Ally, this is the best place to put that because not only will the product team see it, but they'll actually see how the community interacts with it. And that helps them gauge how important something is. It's not the only piece of information they use when looking at roadmap items and stuff, but this is a really good way to get that in front of them if you have an idea for an improvement that you'd like to see. We also have resources available at help.blackboard.com/ally There is a communication and adoption toolkit, so you don't have to go and create a lot of resources. We give you a lot of that. There's resources out there for students, for instructors as well. So take full advantage of that. um, so with that said, we've got a few minutes left. If you have questions, maybe if I missed one in the chat um, that Brian or I did not get to, or if there's something you just thought of, feel free to share it with us.
Doesn't look like there's many
Yeah.
questions coming your way.
I hope that means we got them all addressed, except for these ones that I have to follow up on. And I will do that. I will send the slides, and I think Marcus may have created this room, so he will be the one to have the access to the recording. So I'll have to work with him to get that.
Okay.
But I will share the slides and then work on following up on these questions for you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Al and Brian, and can't thank you enough for all the information you've provided today. And this afternoon, as you mentioned, we're going to have a session for the Instructional Designers Group in our institutional reporting. So we're looking forward to that.
I am too, and I appreciate y'all's time this morning. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience. I really appreciate all the great questions.
Thank you, folks. Here we go.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.